The thing we want to do is we want to talk about the Biophilic Cities movement and talk about what some other cities are doing related to this movement. We then want to talk about the role of the Biophilic Network here at FIPS and the network that we have going on now, and how we want to talk about the new directory that we're creating for both programs and events for different organizations that are doing things related to biophilia. We then have two staff members from the city that are going to talk about the city's Resilient Pittsburgh program and how it relates to biophilia. We're going to look at some projects that the city has that relates to biophilia. We're then going to have an opportunity to talk about those and ask some questions about those projects, get a really good understanding about them. And then we're going to ask all of you to help us put together an inventory of all the different projects and programs that organizations are working on that are related to those different projects that the city's identified, sort of create this inventory for Pittsburgh. And then we're going to talk about next steps and how we, depending on how this goes, and I think we feel a lot of positive energy here about this, so I'm assuming that we're going to get to the point where we actually might have a resolution put before City Council to have Pittsburgh become an official Biophilic Cities, member of the Biophilic Cities program, which is really exciting. So we got a lot of stuff on our agenda tonight, but I think we've got a lot of great ideas and a lot of great people here to help us move forward with this. One of the other things we're going to ask you to do towards the end of the program two, is to help us identify who's not here that should be here, and who's doing programs related to biophilia that we don't know about, that we should get it both on the directory and actually add to our list of organizations working on city-related projects as well. So lots of great stuff going to happen today. I'd like to start off the evening, though, by helping us all get centered and grounded so we can really embark on this together. And I'd like to ask Susan Spangler to come up and lead us in a brief meditation. Susan.
So this is really just an opportunity to give ourselves a chance to fully arrive. We've all come from busy days, so if you'd like to just have, it helps to have both feet flat on the ground, or just have a moment or two of meditation practice. If you'd like for your hands to just be resting on your lap, the chin to be tucked slightly inward, the shoulders relax. You can let the mouth be slightly open, just to let the jaw relax. Really, the practice is about relaxing so that we can just be fully here. If you'd like to let your eyes close, that's fine. If you'd like to leave them open, just let the gaze be downward and soft. And as a way of deepening your presence here in this room, you might open your awareness to include the sounds of this room. Sensations, the feeling of the air on your skin, the weight of your clothes, the feeling of the body in the chair, the feet on the earth. The feeling of the body, however that is right now. And And finally, finding a place where you can feel the body breathing and simply letting your mind rest on the feeling of the body breathing. And letting the mind rest on a wave of breath flowing in and dissolving out with the out breath. And when you hear the sound of a bell, you might enjoy simply following the sound of the bell into silence. And then when you're ready, opening your eyes or lifting your gaze. Lifting your gaze, you can continue to enjoy the feeling of the body breathing as we enjoy opening to the possibility of Biophilic Pittsburgh.
Thank you, Susan. So I want to let you know there's 3 other people that will be presenting with me tonight. There's Emily Kalnicki, who's our Director of Science Education and Research here at Phipps Conservatory. There's also Rebecca Kiernan, who's a Senior Resilience Coordinator for the City of Pittsburgh, and Ari Latananzi, who's a resilience analyst with the City of Pittsburgh. I already mentioned how we're going to go, the overview of what we're going to do tonight. And now I'd like to ask Emily to come up and give us a brief introduction to biophilia.
Out of curiosity, how many of you, this is your first time at a biophilia event? Okay, just a few of you. Well, just to start, before I talk a little bit about biophilic cities, I wanted to just define biophilia. So biophilia is this, it was first defined by Erich Fromm, who's a social psychologist, and he talked about this love of life or living systems. And then more recently, E.O. Wilson, who is a popular biologist, later defined biophilia as this innate love of nature. So it's something really that we are born with, that we experience, and really have this strong affinity and connection with the natural world. And so with that as a part of foundation, to talk a little bit about Biophilic Cities movement, I wanted to talk about the overall goal of this network. Excuse me. So some of you may have been here for Dr. Tim Beatley's presentation on Biophilic Cities a couple of months ago, so some of this may be review. But I think this is really helpful as we're moving forward, as Richard said, going through the activities today to get a sense of what this actually looks like in practice. So the launch of the Biophilic Cities network was in October of 2013. And it started with 11 different partner cities, and representatives from many of the cities came and they had a meeting and they convened, and they did very similar actually to what we're doing tonight, to talk about what are all the things that are going on in each of these cities and where are there opportunities actually for research and this larger kind of network and cohort of organizations and individuals that should be at the table. So they came up with through that process, they developed a steering committee, and they've come up with a goal for this network. And the intention is for it to be international, linking all of these different cities that have a real strong affinity and a desire to connect people to the natural world. So very specifically, they state that their goal is to connect people all over the world, both ordinary citizens and urban leaders, desiring to welcome more nature and greater love of nature into urban life. The network will complement existing networks and organizations and offer a unique opportunity to share best practices and develop a stronger global attitude toward embracing nature in cities. I think this is really important because tonight you're going to be hearing also about the Resilient Cities Initiative, and part of why we're talking about that is these really do complement themselves really well, which you'll hear more about from the city, and how we can better incorporate, again, this overall connection to nature throughout. And one of the things that they define is that this nature, which I think is important, is it's a holistic view. So nature embraces all aspects of urban ecology, from everything including the tiniest microbes to urban wildlife habitats, and to increasing our connection with the wonders of the night sky. So it really is this interdisciplinary kind of perspective looking at the environment and both environmental health and human health. So there's a number of specific requirements, which I'm going to go through relatively quickly, but just to get a good sense again. As a city, you have to adopt an official resolution or other instrument. You have to prepare a narrative statement. You have to select to commit to monitoring a minimum of 5 indicators, and designate a Biophilic Cities contact or coordinator, and the additional expectations as outlined. And the initial status is for 2 years and then can be renewable for periods of 2 to 5. And I'm going to go through each of these individually, again, rather quickly. So the first partner city requirement is to adopt this official resolution or other instrument, which is something that Richard was touching on, that the exact wording is modifiable, but what we're doing tonight is actually working toward that resolution statement. Then you also have to prepare a narrative statement, and this is also something that we're working toward tonight, which is compiling a list of current things that already make the city biophilic, and then establishing what are the specific goals and aspirations for the future with specific steps that the city is going to undertake to enhance nature or the position of nature in the community. So the city has to select and commit to monitoring a minimum of 5 indicators, which are across 4 different categories. And the main categories are natural conditions, qualities, infrastructure, biophilic engagement, participation, activities, and knowledge, biophilic institutions, planning and governance, and then human health and well-being. They also need to designate a Biophilic Cities contact or a coordinator, which is someone that is related to initiatives that the city is doing currently. And then there's other additional expectations outlined in the document, and really the expectations here are actually to be a participant in a network. So it's not just to be a city here, but actually engage with other cities that are also trying to do this process or already doing this process. So thereby hosting cities that want to come and see what are some of the great things going on here in Pittsburgh, or delegates from here going to other cities to see, like, how can we best learn and benefit from each other, participating in blogs, seminars, conferences, those kinds of activities. So when I talk a little bit about those indicators, I wanted to give some examples. So the natural conditions, qualities, and infrastructure, this is just one example that they give. There are many that could fall under this category. But percent of the city population living or working within 300 meters of a green space, park, or natural element would fall under this category. For biophilic engagement, participation, activities, and knowledge, this one might be a little bit more explanatory, and it's percentage of the population visiting parks or green spaces daily is just one example of an indicator. For the biophilic institutions, planning and governance, this could be anything from the percent of the city government that's devoted to nature conservation, restoration, education, or to the existence of this biophilic city strategy action plan or some kind of equivalent. So things like a biodiversity action plan, green infrastructure plan, or some kind of complementary comprehensive element in local government. And lastly, they have a human health and well-being indicator metric, and an example they give is measurable progress, looking at overcoming inequitable or unfair distributions of urban nature through planning. So an example could be increasing urban canopy coverage in neighborhoods or where there are vulnerable populations. So I wanted to overview a little bit, I know I went through that quickly. I wanted to just highlight a little bit what's currently being done. So from these 11 cities that were grandfathered in, these are those cities. So you can see that they are all over the US, and they're also internationally located as well. And again, these are all cities that were part of that initial meeting, and they have all been grandfathered in, and so they are part of the steering committee. So Phoenix, Arizona, for example, they at this point are listing really what are they already doing in their city that's biophilic, and they gave a couple examples of conserving 17,000 acres of desert land, a third of the city's land, which is going to be the largest urban park in the US, and that's something that's being maintained by volunteers at this conservancy. San Francisco has a long list. This is just one example of a very long list that all of these cities have of things that they're already doing related to biophilia. And I'm happy to share that later if anyone's interested. With San Francisco, they have an open spaces planning effort, which is this big collaboration between city planning, the mayor's office, and Parks and Rec and other agencies. And then they have this Pavement to Parks program, which is a collaboration of Department of Public Works, Planning, and Municipal Transit. And it's a program where they're looking at taking parking spaces and actually making them green spaces and having them set up where individuals can go and kind of use that as a meeting space, which I thought was kind of a nice idea. Wellington in New Zealand, they have a number, again, of projects that they're already doing. Their biophilic team is a part of the city council. They give examples of 80 to 90 rain gardens around the city. They have this great sanctuary that has an eco-restoration project and an educational facility, another park that has a wetland area that's really treating stormwater and providing ecological habitats. They have a lot to do with stormwater treatment in New Zealand. So those are all the cities that are grandfathered in. There's a number of cities. These are just two that right now are new adopters, Philadelphia and DC, pretty close to us here in the East Coast. And we've talked with the individuals that are working on these initiatives to learn a little bit more about what they're doing and again, how we can also work together and learn from each other. And so they are very much in the early stages as well. They were actually really excited about this Biophilic Network and these Biophilic meetups that we have here and thought that that was a really great way to engage people in these ideas. Washington, D.C. has just signed a resolution to kind of set the tone for future city projects related to biophilia. And they're really working on ways that they can engage with the city council and government, and pretty specific to wanting to advance projects and focus on biodiversity, so not just the green infrastructure. Philadelphia is also very new. They just launched in May of 2015 with Dr. Tim Beatley, and then Bill Browning came and gave presentations. And they're still working on their resolutions. They haven't officially adopted anything, but they have a catchy slogan, Biophilia Growing Beyond Green, where for them green means really combining sustainability and health. And they are working directly with the Mayor's Office of Sustainability to advance these initiatives. So that's just kind of a quick overview of what some of the other cities are doing. It's very new for the new cities that are adopting. A number of the grandfathered in cities have a long list, as I said, of great things that they are already doing in their cities. And it's a really great, powerful network actually to be a part of, to be able to learn from each other. Thank you.
Thanks, Emily. Now I'd like just to talk about the network and the role of the network that we see going forward with the whole Biophilic City movement. And of course, you know, at FIPS, we're all about connecting people to plants and looking at the connections between people, plants, health, planet, and beauty. So this is something that's really important to us, and that's why we launched the Biophilia Network a little over 2 years ago. We started with when we were building our living building, really getting involved in biophilic design, and we thought, wouldn't it be great to start bringing people from lots of different disciplines together, whether it be artists, educators, the general public, anybody who's interested in these making connections to nature, and really create an opportunity for people to share and learn together. So that was their basis for starting this network a couple of years ago. And we're very interested in expanding it now. We see this network as a great way to continue the whole Biophilic Cities movement. So what we're doing is we're creating a biophilic directory. You know, one of the things when we decided to adopt this or move forward with the Biophilic Cities movement, we didn't want to create another nonprofit that's going to create a whole other need for additional funding from foundations. We want to see, can we leverage some of the existing things that we have going on in the city and all the great talent and people are already working in the city on projects like this. So that's the idea, is to really link existing resources for this movement. And that's where we see this directory is something that's really important, where we could start getting people from lots of different organizations to list things on the directory, and what they're doing is related to biophilia, and actually list events if they're looking for volunteers that they want to let people know about what's going on. We've already had a number of organizations that have started to sign up to be listed on the directory. We'd love to expand this. If you are involved in an organization that does this, or you know someone who should, we'd love to get them on here, because again, there's a lot of great things going on in this city we want to share with everyone. So that this is on our website. It's also on the meetup page. And again, lots of opportunities for creating letting people know about events and volunteer opportunities as well. So that is sort of a lead into now what we want to talk about that the city is working on, the Resilience Pittsburgh. And I think, Rebecca, were you going to start us off? Okay, great. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Kiernan. I'm the Senior Resilience Coordinator for the City of Pittsburgh. So I'm here to talk a little bit about the Resilient Pittsburgh Initiative and how it relates to biophilia. So a little overview of what we're going to talk about, some background on resilience and our ongoing initiatives, how resilience and biophilia intersect, city priorities related to biophilia, and climate change and the climate compact. So what is resilience? 100 Resilient Cities, which is pioneered by the Rockefeller Foundation, which is funding our project, defines urban resilience as the capacity of individuals, communities, institutions, businesses, and systems within a city to survive, adapt, and grow no matter what kinds of chronic stresses and acute shocks they experience. And this is all in relation to the global megatrends of urbanization, globalization, and climate change. So what are shocks and stresses? Shocks are like big one-time events that happen and can impact a city, and stresses are like slow-burning issues that kind of erode the capacity of the city. So in all of our stakeholder engagement that we've had thus far, we've discovered that the major shocks that Pittsburgh faces are climate change and extreme weather, infrastructure failure, hazardous materials accident, landslide and subsidence, and economic collapse. And the major stresses that we're facing are aging infrastructure, economic and racial inequity, environmental degradation, aging workforce, lack of mobility and transportation access, and regional fragmentation. Regional fragmentation is a big theme. I mean, that includes not only the 132 municipalities within Allegheny County, but also the 90 neighborhoods within the city of Pittsburgh, as well as the 5,000 different nonprofits that operate in the county. So what's the value of being a 100 Resilient Cities Network member, which is what Pittsburgh is? We've gotten staffing capacity, so Grant Irvin is the Chief Resilience Officer, and then there's myself and my colleague Ari, who's going to speak next. We're also bringing on 2 Resilience Corps members, which is an AmeriCorps Vista program. They should be arriving next week. We also have a planning consultant, which is the RAND Corporation. They've been helping us with our resilience, they're going to help us with our strategy as well as our analysis. We also have membership in this network of 100 cities, so we're part of the second cohort of 33 cities. So we're part of this network worldwide. There's sister cities who are going through the same issues that we have, like flooding and that kind of stuff. We also have $5 million in pro bono services from platform partners, and those are large businesses like Swiss Re is doing risk assessment. IOB is kind of a small nonprofit that's looking at like crowdfunding. Also the EPA, that kind of stuff. So what are the long-term benefits of going through this strategy process? We plan to elevate and amplify all of our existing plans and initiatives. So, I mean, we have the comprehensive plan, we have the innovation roadmap, and all these other plans and initiatives that exist in the city. So this is kind of like wrangling them all together to look at them through like a resilience lens. Targeting our resource allocation within the city towards these projects. Attracting and directing funding to support our priorities. And then there's also the resilience dividend, so we've pledged 10% of our budget towards resilience initiatives, which when we did the budget analysis, we're already allocating like 59% towards resilience-focused projects. So what's our plan? We've got 2 phases. Currently we're in phase 1, which we've been evaluating the state of resilience in the city of Pittsburgh. We've been doing a lot of data collection and stakeholder engagement, and we're currently going through our preliminary resilience assessment, which we're in like the first draft phase. We're meeting with our steering committee next week. Phase 2 is like a deeper dive into some focus areas. We're going to do a lot more analysis, we're going to generate solutions, and we're going to prioritize. And the outcome of that is going to be a city resilience strategy in the form of a document. And then implementation, of course. So in the past 4 months, we've been doing some pretty extensive stakeholder engagement that's informed our preliminary resilience assessment. We had an initial workshop back in June. We had 160 invited participants. Then we had some focus groups in October. We had about 50 plus participants, and they were from the categories of philanthropy, business, neighborhood, civic, academic, and regional. We then had some deliberative forums, which some of you I recognize and think might have participated in. We had 2 sessions in November, and we had about 140 people total that showed up to those. And then stakeholder perceptions was a workshop with 20 city employees. So we've been gathering a lot of input from different stakeholders within the city. And mainly what we're looking for in our stakeholder engagement has been to identify the shocks and stresses, which I talked about earlier, and then the strengths and the weaknesses of both the city and then in city neighborhoods. So then some of the strengths and weaknesses that the stakeholders identified were our strengths are natural, economic, and social assets. Areas for improvement are inclusive community development, transportation, zoning, and land use, and economic diversification. And then our weaknesses are fragmentation, marginalized populations, and a lack of redundancy. And that's mainly in like transportation with city streets. Everybody's feeling the Greenfield Bridge closure, that kind of stuff. And then I'm gonna pass it off to Ari. Thanks.
So, as we're in this resilience network, we're thinking about what projects we can do that help the city in numerous ways. So co-benefits are really thinking about which projects not only, reduce stormwater, but also improve air quality, reduce urban heat effect. So the green infrastructure plan is a big part of what's improving resilience in the city. But we see a big crossover between resilience and biophilia because a lot of the reasons that we love nature, the things that improve environmental health and human health, is exactly what we want to accomplish with the resilience plan. So Rebecca made this beautiful graphic to show some of the benefits of trees that we're considering as we're talking about resilience. So not only the environmental benefits, but also the improvement in happiness and crime reduction, thinking about biodiversity as an asset to resilience so that we keep our natural habitats, we maintain the stabilization of our hillsides. So there's a very strong collaboration between these. And something I forgot to do, but we'll look into, is which of the biophilic cities are also in the 100 Resilient Cities Network, because I think there'd be some good cross-pollination there. So some of the things the city's already doing related to biophilia, we have the open space plan that was done by the Department of City Planning a couple of years ago. I don't actually know the status of what's come out of that. I know there's the Green Space Alliance, but that's something that we're going to be asking you is kind of what are you doing and how does that relate to some of these city priorities? So if you are doing something that relates to open space in Pittsburgh, we want to hear about that. We want to know who you are and how to really bring everyone together and focus those efforts. City Parks is doing a lot with recreation, connecting kids and communities to nature, working on, again, that intersection of environmental health and human health. The Shade Tree Commission is protecting a lot of and preserving a lot of our public trees. Green Infrastructure Plan I've mentioned is being undertaken by the PWSA to address both stormwater and water quality. Connecting Children to Nature is a grant that we've applied for. So hopefully we get it, but the objective would be to connect 10,000 children from all 90 Pittsburgh neighborhoods to nature. So we don't actually know how many kids are connected to nature now because there are a number of organizations doing that similar work, but we want to know who everyone is so we can come up with this network that really strengthens each other rather than having the fragmentation between different neighborhoods and different organizations. And then we mentioned the platform partners earlier. So the EPA is helping us with a couple projects. They're developing the STEW map, which is matching stewards, like environmental stewards, to natural resources so we can really make sure that we're giving the appropriate attention to the resources that we need to protect. The IOV platform is a small crowdfunding platform for like civic projects. So they're actually opening an office in Pittsburgh so that they can support projects here. Trust for Public Land is working on a mapping tool that will help us identify sites for green infrastructure and other land use that will improve both environmental health and human health and create better resilience. And the German Marshall Fund is going to host or help us host a workshop that will look at the closed loop circular economy. So we'll be thinking about how we can kind of eliminate the concept of waste and turn all of our materials into a more beneficial use. So that's a couple things. Some of the big ones, we are very worried about climate change. As we mentioned, that's going to be a big factor in the risks that we face. So in previous years, we've committed to this goal of reducing our greenhouse gas emissions 20% below 2003 levels by 2023. We think that's no longer sufficient. So we are in the process of doing the third version of our climate action plan. Mayor Peduto went to Paris and he committed the city to these 2030 goals, which are improvements in city operations and services so that we can reduce the municipal footprint, but we also need to have actions that reduce the footprint of the community at large. So we will be structuring the climate action plan based on these groups. So it's fairly standard to have transportation, building, energy use, energy supply, water use, waste management, but we're also putting in a sequestration goal because Pittsburgh does have a lot of open space and green space that we need to really manage so that it's both healthy and also sequestering a lot of that carbon through the growth of kind of strong species and trees. So there's a big opportunity for more biophilia to connect with climate action. We're also considering the idea of a Pittsburgh Climate Compact to amplify the climate action of the city, whereas previously it's been, the city as a government commits to certain actions, some businesses commit to the 2030 District or Green Workplace Challenge, and then some schools have made some commitments. We're hoping to get more members of the community to make very clear, measurable commitments to climate action, and some of that might include biophilia and other green projects. And then we know that for the biophilic cities, we need to be measuring certain indicators. These are some ways that we're already measuring. So we have the eye tree analysis, which is both the urban canopy and the street trees. We have key performance indicators for city performance. The greenhouse gas inventory is just a measure of what the emissions are in the city. The open space plan has some interesting GIS analysis that does show proximity of residents to parks and open spaces. We also have the regional data center, and this is something we're hoping to improve as a community tool so that it's not just the government pushing information out, but also serving as a resource for different organizations to put their information out there, come up with kind of standardized formats so that we can all know what's happening and share data that way. The Sustainable Pittsburgh put out a report in 2004 with regional indicators. They're revisiting that and thinking about which indicators to measure in the future. So I think, as we develop this biophilia discussion, that can inform their indicators project. We're also looking at redoing the Pittsburgh survey. This was a seminal sociological study back in 1907 that looked at the people, the place, and the work of Pittsburgh. So now that we're in Pittsburgh's bicentennial year, this is a project that has been in conversation that hasn't yet taken form, but could be a way to measure some of the indicators that we want to know for biophilia. And then, as mentioned, some of these tools and platform partners are going to be helping us generate some metrics that will help us keep track of our progress. And then I'll turn it over to Richard to handle questions.
So that's what the city is working on now. What we would like to do is see if you have any questions about what the city is working on, particularly as it relates to those 5 areas that they talk about, the open space, connecting children to nature, things like that. And then use that as an opportunity to get a discussion going. And then after we've, we feel that we understand what some of those priorities are, we'd like to ask you to help us to identify projects or programs that are already taking place in Pittsburgh by various organizations. And we'll have post-it notes in back. We'll ask you to help us post notes on all of those sheets of paper up there, so we can really start to develop this inventory of what's going on. Again, we really want to leverage the existing things that are going on in the city and all the great talents in the city, and to get us all on the same page as far as moving the city forward and really enhancing the quality of life in the city for both people the animals and the environment and other things. Okay, so somebody have any questions for Harry or Rebecca? About some of the initiatives?
I just had a question. You said that
Maybe you'd like to come up here for
You said that 10% of the budget for the city is used for resilience? I didn't understand what you meant by that.
So the pledge is that we're going to commit 10% of our budget towards projects that improve resilience. So that's things like investing in our infrastructure, investing in social services. So looking at what the city already spends money on, we already commit most of our capital budget projects to projects that improve resilience. So we're just documenting it, and in exchange for that, the 100 Resilient Cities Network is rewarding us this $5 million in pro bono services.
Has the city discussed reducing the amount of pavement in the city and switching not only the width of roadways, but the sidewalks and parking lots, and what ambitions we might have for greening those?
Okay, so as Pittsburgh's developing its first comprehensive plan, they're coming out with some of the stages first. So the open space plan is already out. They're working on the historical preservation plan. The culmination of that will be really a comprehensive land use plan. But I've already been talking with some of the planners, and they're very keen on reducing parking requirements because we don't want to encourage vehicular use. We want to reduce the impervious surfaces. There are certain things we can't change. Like we actually might be broadening sidewalks because we're encouraging more pedestrian use and better safety of our pedestrians. But there is a move away from impervious surfaces to more open space. And there's a set of Pittsburgh principles that are helping to guide the development of the entire comprehensive plan that's coming out in sections. So those should be coming out, and it's based on the P4 principles, which is the people, planet, performance, and place.
Just make it easy. A lot of these issues have a lot to do with zoning. So how are you working with zoning to look at issues like, let's just take parking for instance. The amount of people driving is steadily decreasing. So why do we still have the same requirements for parking for businesses? We're starting to look at zoning issues like that for increased green space, for decreasing parking requirements, things like that.
That's being done. It's officially within the Department of City Planning to do that, but we're working together across departments.
is thinking of what he's going on, one of the best ways to reduce cars and so on is mass transportation. Does this accommodate that in some way?
Yeah, I mean,
Beyond the T.
right. The Port Authority of Allegheny County, unfortunately, is not a city entity, but we do work really closely with them and make recommendations and try to engage them in our resilience strategy. I mean, they're on the steering committee. Yeah.
I look at it, I live in the South Hills. It's extremely, and I've lived in a lot of other big cities, it's extremely problematic to get around. I don't like coming here because I have to drive my car for the most part if I want to get here in time. And it would just be good if in the long-term goal they put something. I don't think in the next 5 years, but 20 years.
So that relates to one of the mayor's initiatives in the 2030 goal is to reduce transportation emissions by 50%. And that is, some of that will come through technology gains that reduce the emissions in vehicles, but also we're looking at the Complete Streets policy, which is trying to optimize streets not only for public transit, but also for pedestrians and cyclists and people of all abilities and ages. So while our direct power over that isn't established, it is part of the overall vision. And so the city's working on things like the bus traffic transit plan, things that will improve mobility and improve access without requiring use of cars.
I'm interested in the transition, this huge transition that we have to make from a big angle, from away from fossil fuels and the employment connected to, and with people already stressed. How much or where is there discussion of how do we get people in the culture away from doing things like constantly manicuring their lawns with water, it's just ridiculous. So the need for this huge transition isn't hit people yet.
Sure. Traditionally, we've been focused on like within city facilities kind of sustainability, but with the resilience plan, we're really branching out. We have 2 resilience core fellows that are starting next week, and we're going to have them actually go out into the communities and come up with their own resilience plans. So doing a lot of community outreach and hosting events and that kind of stuff that would really align those principles with some community engagement.
That's also an area where FIPS might be able to help. We have a sustainable land care program where we're teaching landscapers how to take care of people's properties without using a lot of chemicals, but also encouraging people to use native plants, reduce the amount of lawns they have as well. So there are a number of programs. And again, this is where I think the benefit of creating this network is where there's a lot of things like whether we're doing it or some of the organizations you work for can all help with this, the city, not only the resilience plan, but also enhance the idea of biophilia in the city as well.
And the other element of that, which was the kind of how the economy is still reliant on fossil fuels in the area. We are aware of that. Something we've been thinking about is also workforce training and transition. There is an aging workforce in Pittsburgh. There's a lot of people who are unemployed or underemployed. So we're looking at strategies about workforce transition, kind of seeing how Germany has been a leader in that transition and helping communities transition from traditional jobs and fossil fuels to new jobs.
One of the stresses you mentioned was regional fragmentation, which I agree with wholeheartedly, especially in the stormwater and land use area. But I'm just wondering, how do you see this program being able to deal with that issue?
I think the main focus of the resilience strategy is to actually like encompass everything that's going on within the city and put it through like a resilience lens. So it's going to be a lot of partnerships with, the different municipalities, different organizations. I mean, even what we're doing tonight, like trying to get a feel of what everybody in the city is doing and how we can partner and work together to kind of work through the fragmentation.
And then between cities, we are talking with entities like Connect, which is the Congress of Neighboring Communities, and ALOM, the Allegheny League of Municipalities. So what we're doing is essentially trying to come up with the best solutions that will impact the most people. So certain things we only have control over the city of Pittsburgh, but if we can come up with some best practices and share those and get some collaborations and share resources, then we can have a bigger impact on the rest of the region.
To motivate people and developers, etc., and encourage various changes in the way people have been doing things in terms of construction. It sounds to me like you're going to need a lot of money. Have you figured out a budget and how it should grow? And what you mentioned the Rockefeller Institute having given you a grant. What other organizations can you expect to get grants from in the future, and what are you doing about that?
So part of this is deciding how we can use the money the city already has to improve resilience. So looking at our capital budget and operating budget and seeing if we can use that money to achieve more of these co-benefits, because a lot of it has been routine maintenance. But if we are repairing a bridge, what can we also do that, improves pedestrian safety on that bridge, or improves stormwater management on that bridge? So first, we're just looking at how we can better use the money that Pittsburgh already has. And then we do have this $5 million in services through the Rockefeller Foundation and the network. So that's going to be entities like the EPA and like Impact Infrastructure, who are giving us services that are worth $5 million that will help us kind of elevate what we're already doing and improve just regular operations. Part of what we're working on with the Climate Action Plan is kind of nominating people in the community to take action and be responsible for those actions. So within the nonprofit space, who's going to step up and really make sure that in their work they're improving both resilience and reducing emissions. So, part of that is going to come out in the strategy So right now we're just assessing, and then as we move into phase 2, we'll be really figuring out the solutions and how we fund them and who's really responsible for which parts. But I think we all want this to be a self-sustaining process.
Well, you mentioned 5 million. Is that your immediate goal right now?
Those are
That's
pro
what we
bono
have.
services that the Rockefeller Foundation has given to us to use from different companies and organizations because we've pledged 10% of our budget towards resilience.
Okay, we have time for one more question.
So the 100 resilient cities identified aging infrastructure as one of the stresses and then also as one of the weaknesses for Pittsburgh. I was wondering if the Resilient Cities Network or the Biophilia Network was speaking with PWSA or Alcasans about the major reconstruction of our infrastructure, specifically in relation to stormwater management.
So the stresses were actually identified by members of the community. So these are people who were telling us that they're concerned about the infrastructure, and we know that we do have an infrastructure problem. We have been working with a lot of the different entities in the city, especially PWSA and Alcasan. We'll actually be talking with Alcasan in our German Marshall Fund workshop about how we can better use or kind of maybe do a waste to energy or some other format of circular economy closed loop function. So PWSA is one of them. We're also talking with the SBC. We're talking with the Port Authority. So, and we're talking with you. We're really trying to get a sense of who's doing what and how can we bring everyone together to work around the same goals of making Pittsburgh healthier, safer, and more sustainable.
Okay, great. Thank you both very much. As you can see, there's a lot of great things going on in the city right now, and it's really interesting to me to see a lot of interest here in this whole idea of resilience, and it's great to see that the city's working on these programs related to resilience. Of course, we're here tonight to talk about biophilia, and I think we saw how biophilia can be related to some of these issues related to resilience. So the goal for us tonight is to really try to identify what are some of the things that are going on in the community that we're involved in or that we know that other people are involved in and help tie into some of the city's priority goals related to biophilia, which then goes back and really supports this whole idea of creating a resilient city. So I would like to ask Emily Kalnicki to come up right now and to walk us through the next part of the program.
Thanks. I think just reiterating what Richard said, at this point we really want to hear from all of you, same with what Ari and Rebecca were saying. There's a lot of great things going on in the city, a lot of things that are related to the different initiatives. And so we want you to take on your lens of you as an individual in an organization, or both. And we have scattered around the tables sticky pads and a lot of pens. And we have plenty more, so just go ahead and take a handful of them. What we want you to do is to reflect on the 5 main projects that was presented to us by Ari that the city is engaged with, both in a number of their plans that relate to biophilia, and list things that you yourself or you as an organization are already doing related to those areas, and they're all listed along the wall. We also have extra categories for a couple of the other areas that were mentioned tonight, climate action and the overall resilience plan in general, and then an other, if you find things that you are doing that are related to biophilia that you don't see it, that fall really into one of these areas. We really are trying to capture all the great things that are going on in the city related to biophilia. And then also we were wanting you to capture other organizations that should be added to the directory that Richard mentioned that you didn't see on there. So we're asking you again to go ahead around to the different tables, things that could be current or planned initiatives, and really try to be specific if there's any statistics about it. So you've planted X number of trees in this borough, or those kinds of things are great to help us capture all the great things that are going on in the city. And then as a reminder, also go ahead and write other things that other organizations that might be included or should be included on the directory. And then we're going to ask you to go around and actually read what everyone's written on there. And then there's a series of dots that are on the corner of the table that we're going to have you pick the kind of top 2 under each initiative that really best would emphasize that strategy for the city, or that aspect of the city's plan. And then we're gonna just do a quick wrap up and talk about what are the next steps. Any questions on that process? Yep.
Are we just supposed to list things that we're doing, or is it also things you would like to see done?
I think both. I think, and you can put it, if it's something that's actually like a planned initiative or something that you would like to have, you could put an asterisk next to it, or quickly identify would like to see. Make it very clear that it's something that you're not already doing. And if you are with an organization, if you could also just list that on there too, like with the Pittsburgh Parks Conservancy is doing X, that would be really helpful as we're compiling this later into that larger inventory and seeing all the great things that are going on already in the city related to biophilia. Other questions? Okay, if not, then I think we'll dedicate about 15 minutes. And also help yourself if you hadn't already. There were some refreshments and restrooms are through that door as well. And then go ahead and grab a pen and sticky notes. And we're all around as well if you have questions.